I love movies. Gosh, I love movies.
We come to this place for magic.
I watch a lot of movies.
You do?
Yeah, I watch about a movie a day.
Welcome to Cinephomaniacs, a podcast by and for movie lovers. I'm Peyton.
And I'm Andrew. And this is our first full episode ever. Today we're talking about a new horror film that hits theaters this weekend, Curry Barker's Obsession. But first, we're going to briefly discuss what else we've been watching lately in a segment we call Added to Watch List.
So the trailer for Tony just dropped, which is directed by Matt Johnson of Nirvana the band. It's about a year in the life of Anthony Bourdain, who I'm not going to pretend I know that much about, but I'm very excited to learn in the lead up to this movie. It comes out August 7th, and the trailer looks so good. The seafood looks amazing. The cast is stacked. What do you think about it?
I'm not the biggest Anthony Bourdain fan. For me, he was always like a guy that would be on the hotel TV. He wasn't someone I really followed. But I am a big Matt Johnson fan.
Me too.
Recently, we've really gone down the rabbit hole of everything Nirvana, the band. We watched Blackberry, The Dirties. So I'm definitely excited to see what he does next after Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. The trailer to me looked fine. It kind of just looks like a typical biopic to me. I like Dominic Sessa. I'm excited to see him. And I'm excited to see what Matt Johnson does with kind of a normal, like, Hollywood movie.
Yeah, Dominic Sessa is very exciting for me. He was a very fun part of Now You See Me Part 3, which definitely, unfortunately, the weakest in the franchise, I think. So he was a standout there. Did you see that?
No.
That's one we'll have to add to watch list then for you. And he's obviously a standout in The Holdovers. That's a favorite of mine every year around Christmas time. But what are you excited to watch that's coming up, Andrew?
One movie that I'm excited about is Evil Dead Burn. We got the trailer recently. It looks a lot like the last two Evil Dead movies to me. It looks cool. I think a lot of the kills are really exciting. I kind of wish it gave us a little less than it gives us. I feel like we already know too many of the surprise moments, but hopefully they have some more up their sleeve. I feel like we just got another Evil Dead movie recently with The Mummy, but I'm always excited to see new ones. I think the premise is interesting. It reminds me of Final Destination Bloodlines. It's about this estranged family that reunites for a funeral, and then the Deadites come out. And I think that's an interesting framing device for an Evil Dead movie. What do you think? Are you excited for Evil Dead Burn?
I am. I recently rewatched Evil Dead Rise because we did see The Mummy, and everyone was saying how similar it was to Rise, which I didn't catch at the time right after watching it, but upon revisiting, they are pretty much the same, or not pretty much the same film, but they do have a lot of similarities. I think Lee Cronin clearly has a very distinct style that he's going for, and I don't know that they're my favorites, either The Mummy or Evil Dead Rise, but I certainly had a lot of fun in the theater with both of them. I'm excited for this one in that aspect. I think even if it isn't a top one for me overall in the year, it'll be a really fun time.
But a horror movie you are excited for is
Backrooms, directed by Kane Parsons, coming out pretty soon, actually, May 29th. I haven't watched the web series, so I'm going in kind of blind. I know it's based on the web series that he created, so I don't really want any spoilers before going in, which is new for me. But this one also has an incredible cast. Oh my god. I think the trailer just looks so good, and it's obviously getting rave reviews, but I've spent days of my life now watching trailer breakdowns, seeing what everyone else thinks about it, and kind of trying to learn as much as I can about it without getting into too much spoiler territory. But yeah, that is a big one coming up for me. And finally, what do you have for us?
one that I'm really excited for is the new film from Brad Bird, Ray Gun. And all we got is the concept art and sort of announcement of this movie this week. Brad Bird has primarily directed animated movies. He directed The Iron Giant, The Incredibles 1 and 2, Ratatouille, and he also directed Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. If you know me, then you know that The Iron Giant is a really big one for me. So the idea of him coming out with a new animated film is just really exciting to me. The synopsis is that it's about a private investigator drawn into a case involving aliens and murder in an alternate futuristic city. And I just think that sounds right up Brad Bird's wheelhouse, just the sort of retro futuristic aesthetic. I think it's really exciting. The one thing that's sort of giving me qualm is that it's going to be released on Netflix. And I'd really like to see it in theaters. So I'm hoping they give it a rollout similar to Frankenstein and some of the other movies that have gotten a theatrical release in the last few years.
Our next section is called Remove from Watchlist. And we call it that because, well, why don't you tell us, Andrew?
We're calling it Removed from Watchlist because I've garnered kind of a reputation for the size of my watchlist on Letterboxd. If you're not familiar with Letterboxd, it is a social media platform for film reviews. I've been on there for about 10 years now, and over the years I've just added to my watch list again and again. I would watch a filmmaker I liked and add all their movies, and it's really grown, and it is... Do you want to say how large the watch list is right now?
Right now it stands at 58,224. So modest.
Modest. So that's why we're calling this Removed from Watch List. We're going to talk about movies we've seen recently, just give little mini reviews, and hopefully these are movies that we can remove from that watch list and bring that number down.
Yes, hopefully we can whittle that down just a little bit. One that we actually watched together recently is Whistle, which came out late last year and stars Daphne Keane of Logan and Sophie Nélisse of Yellow Jackets, which is probably my favorite show of all time. And that is a horror movie about students who come upon an Aztec death whistle, and anyone unlucky enough to hear the whistle blown unfortunately meets their untimely demise. This is one that actually, for a change, Andrew liked a bit more than me, so why don't you share some thoughts on it?
Yeah, I thought it was really fun. The setup is a lot like Final Destination, which is really, it's about these teenagers who have a death curse on them and them dying in outlandish ways. I found it really fun. I thought the production value was really high. This is kind of in the vein of like a Blumhouse low-budget horror movie. So you'd expect them to cut corners on sets, location, extras. But they really don't. This world feels very lived in. There's a scene where they go to a harvest festival, which is kind of like a carnival in this movie. And it just felt really big and real. I really appreciated that they invested that much into it, and I thought the movie was really fun. I thought the kills were cool. It reminded me of sort of like B-tier horror movies from the 2000s. I feel like, 15 years ago this wouldn't even be that remarkable because this is just how they made them. Now that they sort of churn them out really cheaply, I thought this was really well done.
And we love that for you. When I saw this in theaters, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more, which I think can often be the case for movies. Just being at the theater adds a bit more to your experience. But the kills are wonderful. Two in particular are so much fun. I would say watch the movie just for those two scenes. And the acting is very good overall. I think the characters are given some very cheesy lines, and they do make them believable. I do agree that the world feels lived in, kind of similar to what I just said. I believe these characters. I believe their friend group. I feel for what's happening to them. And I'm really glad you loved it. I wished I liked it as much as you did.
Thank you. There was this one character that I thought was really interesting, almost out of a more interesting movie, which was this youth pastor who's actually a drug dealer, and he's like selling drugs to the congregation. I thought that was really interesting, and it's almost a footnote in this movie, but I would have liked to see a movie about that character.
Yeah, I think that is a fun part, and that character comes in at the end. He makes a big impression on the story and does add a lot of fun. So yeah, I get what you mean there. Another one that we were able to watch together recently, also directed by Matt Johnson, who, yeah, we have just become mega fans of since Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie came out. We just watched The Dirties, which was also directed by Matt Johnson, of course, and came out in 2013. Can you give a little synopsis of that one?
The Dirties is kind of a mockumentary in a similar style to Matt Johnson's other movies and other projects like Nirvana, the band. It's about student filmmakers in high school who are making a movie about taking revenge on their bullies. And they decide to kill their bullies for real and film it. So it's kind of a dark comedy drama about bullying and school shootings, but just through this really, dry comedic sensibility that Matt Johnson has.
Yeah, I was very surprised because I knew what the movie was about and that it was going to touch on what is a very serious, harrowing, difficult topic, the topic of school shootings. So really, until you get to that point, there's a lot of, I think, levity to the film that Matt Johnson does just naturally bring. And all of the actors in the movie are really good. I think they also make the world feel very lived in. And I just, even though they don't necessarily look like high schoolers, I very much buy into what they're selling. But yeah, up until the very end, when things do get very serious, it doesn't feel like that's the kind of movie that you're watching.
Yeah, you talked about it feeling lived in. I felt like the high school scenes were shot in a real high school during class. I'm really curious to know how they pulled this off, because it truly did feel like, these adults just snuck into a high school with cameras in the middle of the day.
And knowing Matt Johnson, they might have.
They probably did. We found this movie on
YouTube.
Yeah, we couldn't find it on any of the legitimate platforms, but there were a few copies on YouTube, so it should be pretty easy to find. Another movie that's easy to find on YouTube is James Obar's The Crow. Now, this is not the Crow film starring Brandon Lee. This is a student film made by 16-year-olds about 4 years later. We watched this for Freaky Friday, which is an event here in Orlando at the Enzian Theater. They'll show a movie on a Friday at midnight. Typically, it's a more obscure movie or just kind of a weird movie that maybe not everyone has seen. This one was really obscure. This had about 100 watches on Letterboxd before we watched it. And it was actually a secret screening. The programmer at the Enzian, Tim Anderson, basically said that for copyright reasons, they couldn't promote this movie. So they promoted it as a secret screening. And in the lead up to this event, I kind of deduced what it was through some helpful hints from Tim's Letterboxd. What did you think of James Obar's The Crow?
I thought it was so much fun. It has so much heart, and these kids are acting their asses off. I was so pleasantly surprised by how well it's edited, by truly how much all of them are bringing to each character, by how well they captured the spirit of the Brandon Lee film, which I also am a huge fan of. I actually watched that for the first time about a year ago now and just really fell in love with it. So I really was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I thought for being teenage filmmakers, I thought this was really well shot and edited for them being teenage filmmakers. It's clear that they're working with limited means, but the shots they're choosing they're not easy to get. It takes a lot of vision. As I was researching this movie, I found that they used a lot of the frames from the comic like storyboards for the movie, which I found to be, I found that to be very practical, because I struggle to think that I could come up with some of these shots in a vacuum. I thought the acting was really strong too. The director of the film is also playing the Crow. I thought he was really strong in that role. He felt very natural on screen. The main villain also, I thought, was giving a really good performance.
I agree. I think you can tell that the people that made it really have a lot of passion for the source material, and that comes across in every way. It's free on YouTube, like Andrew started this with, so I think we both highly recommend going and checking that out.
Another movie I saw recently was Outcome. This is the most recent Jonah Hill movie. I actually saw this one on my own, so it's hard to recommend this one because Jonah Hill has been kind of controversial in the last few years, and it almost feels like this movie is his response to the controversy.
Andrew actually sent me a tweet saying that this movie feels like Jonah Hill's If I Did It.
Yeah, the main character of this movie is called Reef Hawk. He's played by Keanu Reeves. Get it? But he's basically like the most likable celebrity in the world. You see him search his own name and find these articles like, 10 celebrities who've never done anything wrong, or top 10 nice Reef Hawk moments. So it feels like he's sort of playing a version of himself, but maybe also playing a version of Jonah Hill, because we learned that this character is actually really toxic to everyone around him and has made a ton of enemies in the industry. Even though he's very beloved as an actor, he's just kind of wronged everyone in his life. He's struggled with substances and like mental health issues and kind of has no one left in his life. So I did feel like some of this was Jonah Hill drawing from his own experiences and just, a lifetime in working in Hollywood. I call it a satire. It's walking a really fine line that can be almost annoying. And I think a lot of people are going to fall on the side of just not liking this. I found it really funny. I think Martin Scorsese has a really funny role in it. I thought Jonah Hill's role was really funny in it. So I would recommend you check it out and see how you feel about it. Are you going to check it out?
Maybe.
And one more that I saw was The Last Matinee. This is an Argentinian film, I believe. It is a horror movie set at a cinema in the early 90s, and it's the last, well, like the title says, it's pretty much the last matinee showing this cinema is ever going to have before they close it. So it plays out pretty much in real time as these characters are watching this like B horror movie within their universe. As that's happening, there's all kinds of interpersonal dynamics. They're like sneaking out, sneaking back in. People are hooking up in the theater. And there's a slasher happening in the theater and around the theater. I wasn't like blown away by it, but I did think it was really solid, a really fun theater. And I thought it was really fun also just to kind of hang out with these characters even before the slasher is happening. So this is one I'd also recommend you check out.
This one I definitely will. I'm almost always down to watch new horror, so.
Hey, it's Nikki. You're not ignoring me, are you?
And now, for the reason we're all actually here, Obsession, directed by Curry Barker, hits theaters this Friday, or Thursday technically. We had the pleasure of seeing this one 2 times recently at the Florida Film Festival, once at the Anzion Theater and once at another local Regal, and we had really high expectations for it, or at least I personally did, and I think it not only met but exceeded them by pretty much every metric. I absolutely loved this. I can't wait to watch it again the first chance I get. I cannot recommend this enough, and I can't wait to talk about it with you. Oh my god.
I totally agree. This movie has been on our radar since way back in September. It premiered at TIFF, so some of the people we follow were, tweeting about it, logging it on Letterboxd. And we didn't really have anything to go off at the time other than this one photo of the main actor, Michael Johnston, in the bathroom. But that one photo and the plot synopsis just hooked us immediately. He's like sitting in the bathroom and he's just covered in blood and he has this blank stare on his face. And I feel like we're so curious, how does he get there? Like, whose blood is that? What could he have done to make him so dead inside? So we waited months for this to come out. And when the Florida Film Festival announced that they were going to play it, we, instantly put both of the screenings on our calendar to make sure we saw it both times.
Yeah, this, again, can't overstate how excited we were, exactly what you said, and we had a feeling, I think, that this would be on the list of movies that they were showing, and thankfully it was.
This is Curry Barker's first big theatrical movie. Were you familiar with him before this?
Just a little bit. So some of you may have heard of the YouTube film Milk and Cereal that premiered right before Obsession was announced, and that was my first introduction to him.
That was the only thing I knew him from, too. I saw Milk and Cereal at the time on YouTube, and I thought it was surprisingly good. I thought his acting in it as the serial killer was really good. I wasn't familiar with his YouTube channel outside of that. He has this channel, That's a Bad Idea, with Cooper Tomlinson. And it's like sketch comedy. They're like little Tim Robinson sketches. Totally unlike the movies he's made. You know, we looked back at some of his horror short films preparing for this.
I think with his horror shorts, we watched in particular Heavy Eyes, Warnings, and The Chair. And I think they're all somewhat similar in that they deal with maybe an unreliable narrator of sorts, or kind of playing with time, and they have a distinct visual style as well. I think I would believe that all of these took place in the same universe, and I think I love what it is that he's going for. The comedic skits, I think it was really fun to see a different side of both Curry Barker and Cooper Tomlinson. We've watched a lot of interviews with Curry preparing for this podcast, and he's listed Key and Peele as probably his biggest inspiration in terms of comedy, and I think that really comes through in the sketches. They're really funny. I highly recommend checking that channel out.
Yeah, I thought they were really funny as well. I think learning that Key and Peele is a big inspiration to him made a lot of sense to me, just in terms of the type of comedy he makes, but also the transition to horror. You know, Jordan Peele is one of our biggest horror filmmakers right now. I think a lot of his shorts were interesting to me visually, but the ideas didn't quite pan out for me. I think he had interesting concepts, but then he would just like resolve them in a way that I didn't find satisfying. I found to be kind of hard to understand at points. I feel like Obsession is a much tighter scripted movie, and Milk and Cereal as well. We actually just kind of randomly learned that his father is a screenwriting consultant. His name is Jeff Barker, and he's the host of a podcast called The Screenplay Lab. I feel like maybe with Milk and Cereal, and especially Obsession, Curry really sat down and like focused on the script, focused on making sure everything that was set up had a payoff. Because it's a fairly straightforward plot, but I think it really does work really well. So should we get into it?
Yeah, let's talk.
We're going to start with a non-spoiler version, so if you haven't seen it, you can go ahead and listen to this. We'll let you know once we start spoiling things.
So the basic premise of Obsession, or the tagline, if you will, is our protagonist Bear makes a wish that his crush, Nikki, loves him more than anyone else in the world. So we open with Bear and his friend Ian, who's played by Cooper Tomlinson, at a diner where they are practicing Bear's love confession to Nikki. And so this is giving us, of course, some exposition on Bear and Nikki's relationship, but I think it's done in a way that doesn't feel like an exposition dump. I think it really does a good job of endearing you to a character that is not necessarily going to stay as endearing as we get more into the story. And it kind of takes you through what Bear and Nikki's relationship has been up until now, how he feels about her, and really gives you insight into the fact that he clearly loves her very much, or at least thinks he does.
Yeah, and the first shot is actually a bit of a fake out because we only see Bear at first as he's confessing his love to Nikki. So we finally see the reverse shot. We see this woman who we think is Nikki, and then she gets up. She's just a waitress at this diner. So we actually don't even get to meet Nikki for a few more scenes.
So we first meet Nikki a couple of scenes later, like you said, when our core group of friends for this movie, Bear, Nikki, Ian, and Sarah, are at trivia later that night at a bar. And it was established in the diner scene that they were going to all be together later tonight. And Bear really wants to take this opportunity to tell Nikki how he feels and ask her out. But Ian thinks that there's a chance this might not go too well for him and really doesn't want the sanctity of trivia night to be ruined. So he is doing everything he can to stop this from happening, but still, Bear does find a way to get her alone. And this is a really sweet scene between the two, and I think you had some thoughts you wanted to share?
I think as soon as we see Nikki, we get it. First of all, Indy Neverett is the name of the actress who plays Nikki, and she runs away with this movie. Like, this movie is on the back of Indy Neverett. As soon as we see her, she's beautiful, first of all, but like, she's just a really sweet girl. We get this scene of like Bear offering to pay, but she switches his credit card for hers, and it's just a really cute, charming move. You can easily see why Bear would like her. Bear's just socially awkward. He can't bring himself to actually ask her out, even when they're alone. And you kind of get the sense that maybe she sees him as like little brother. So he doesn't get up the courage to ask her out at the bar. As they're leaving, though, she needs a ride home, so he gets another opportunity alone with her. And again, he just cannot bring himself to ask her out. She pretty much asks him straight up, like, do you like me? And he still can't get the courage to say it.
So earlier in the movie, Bear goes to this oddity shop, would you call it?
I think oddity shop is good.
To get a gift for Nikki, and he can't find the kind of necklace he's looking for. So instead he sees something called a one-wish willow, and it basically is a tiny little piece of a tree branch that, as advertised on the box, when you break it in half, you get to make a wish, and for $6.99, that wish will come true. So he picks this up intending to give it to her, but when he can't find the courage to ask her out or tell her how he feels, he instead decides to use the wish for himself, to wish that Nikki loves him more than anyone in the entire world.
And I don't think we can give away too much more without getting into spoiler territory, but I think we can safely say, with this being a horror movie, that his wish does not turn out the way he wanted it to.
Yeah, like you alluded to earlier, and like Curry Barker has said in many interviews, this movie does not work without Nikki, and Indy Neverett absolutely makes this role her own. I think she establishes herself as a scream queen to watch out for 100%. She is asked to do some absolutely insane things in this movie, and not once is it not believable, not once do I not feel for Nikki. Not once am I not horrified and completely enthralled. She just... I'm speechless, honestly, just thinking about it now.
Indy Neverett runs away with it, for sure. She has to play a character who hits a lot of different extremes. I think Michael Johnston also has a difficult leading role to play.
I would agree with that. I think when we meet him, he comes across as very sweet, someone you very much empathize with, someone you're rooting for to get the girl. But pretty much as soon as the wish is made, the movie just ramps up to 100 and stays there. Things get very extreme right away in ways that don't always reflect the best on Bear's character and the choices that he makes. And I think Michael Johnston does do a wonderful job kind of balancing that humanity and person that we saw at the beginning with this guy who really is making the best of a horrible situation, but only for himself. And it's a wonderful portrayal from both of them.
It was fun to see Cooper Tomlinson in this movie, especially after seeing him in all of Curry's short films. He's the best friend character, but I think he does really well with it. Sometimes with these YouTube guys, it kind of feels like they don't belong in a Hollywood movie, but I think he fit right in.
Yeah, he is excellent. And actually, one of the other short films on their YouTube channel that we watched is called Enigma. And that one was written by and stars Cooper. And he really ran away with that one, I think, for me as well. So that one, I was really moved by his performance. And I think he doesn't have as much to do dramatically as Bear and Nikki are asked to do, but he really brings it every time he's on screen. He's very fun to watch. And his character does have some big moments that also wouldn't work if he wasn't playing it perfectly, and I think he does.
Yeah, Enigma was my favorite of Curry's shorts that we watched. It's not really a horror movie, it's more of a straight drama, but I found it really touching, and I thought Cooper was very good in it. I think other than Indy Neverett, the real star here, though, is Curry Barker as writer-director. I think this is such a more accomplished movie than Milk and Cereal, a movie that was already really good. The way this movie is shot has so much personality. The camera will move at like just the right moment to make you laugh or scare you. It's almost like the camera is its own character. The script is sharp. It's striking the perfect balance between thriller, horror, but also black comedy. It's just a really fun and intense movie, and both times we saw it, I think the crowd was just eating it up.
Yes, absolutely. This is definitely one to see in a packed theater, which the way Blumhouse is pushing this, I think there's potential for there to be many of those.
Yeah, this might not have been the most expensive movie to make, but Blumhouse and Focus Features seem to really be putting a lot of money behind getting this into theaters and promoting it. I'm seeing a lot of hype for this movie. And, having seen it already, I think we can both attest that, it lives up to the hype.
In every way. It exceeded it for me personally. And like I said, I already had very high expectations. But yeah, this is one we both think you all should add to your watch list.
Yeah, at this point in the year, this is easily the best horror movie I've seen. And I think by the time we get to the end of the year, this is probably still going to be in my top 10 movies of the year. I can't imagine this falling out of the top 10.
I can't either. And with that being said, I don't know if we can keep talking about it without getting into spoilers. So if you're not here for that, thank you for joining us. But let's talk about it. So a bit of a content warning if you're a cat lover out there like me.
So before we even meet Nikki, we see that the cat has gotten into some prescription medications and died. And Bear is just devastated.
Rightfully so.
Are you familiar with the phrase "save the cat"?
No.
Save the Cat is a screenwriting book and a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. Basically, it means make your character likable in the first few pages. So the stereotypical version of that is have the main character save a cat, and the audience will be with them for the rest of the way. I feel like Cooper is doing kind of a dark, twisted version of that, because the first two things we learn about Bear, we get this very sweet confession of love to the fake Nikki, so we know he really does have good intentions with her at this point. And then we see him lose his cat, and we sympathize with him on that level. So I think they do a lot in the very beginning to make us sympathize with Bear.
I think so too, and I think Michael Johnson is just bringing so much heart to this role, even when Bear starts to look a little worse as a character. And like we said earlier, pretty much as soon as Bear makes the wish, the movie takes a hard right turn, and Nikki very immediately starts acting weird. So Bear has dropped her off at her house at this point, but he hasn't yet driven away when he makes the wish. And as soon as he snaps that branch, Nikki is back outside and she's walking back up to his car, asking if she can go home with him for the night.
Right away, she's behaving differently than the Nikki we met before. The knowledge she has doesn't even seem to line up with what we know Nikki to know. Like, one of their first interactions is she says, "My cat just died. Do you really want to leave me?" And he's like, "My cat just died." She's like, "Oh yeah, that's what I meant." And I actually turned to Pei at this point. I'm like, that's not her. That's someone else in her body.
Yeah, and Indy Navarette really shines here because you can just feel the immediate switch. And so Bear, unsurprisingly, does bring her home with him. And she is, even from here, just ramping up the weirdness. Her emotions are kind of all over the place. She's going from laughing and really enjoying her time with him to crying. She shares that her dad is dying, her dad who we learn that Nikki, the real Nikki, isn't even close with at all and shouldn't be having this kind of reaction to. But she's just kind of saying anything she can to keep herself in this space with Bear, which I think presents a really interesting dynamic right away because Bear has obviously been and is so enamored with her, but he's pretty immediately freaked out by this behavior and not as into it as I would have thought the boy that we had met earlier would be.
Yeah, and I think it's a good illustration of kind of the movie's core message about be careful what you wish for. I think this is something we see in real life where you're maybe attracted to someone in a superficial way, but when you're actually close to them in a scenario of dating them, you realize it's not what you thought. You didn't know them the way you thought you did. I think this being kind of a, fucked up horror movie, it's the extreme version of that. But I do think one of the reasons this works so well is that it's an expression of a scenario that we can all relate to.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's why what you touched on earlier is so important in terms of that setup for Bear's character. Because as this movie goes on, Nikki is going to do increasingly deranged, screwed up things that Bear continues to gloss over and ignore, even to the point of her physical harm and detriment, because he is just so happy to finally be with Nikki, even if the Nikki that he's with is clearly in distress and not at all the same person that we met at the start of this movie, clearly not the person that he has known and says or claims to have loved for years.
One thing I like about this movie is they very much don't let Bear off the hook. I think it's really clear how Curry Barker wants us to feel about what Bear is doing because, like you said, he's basically unconcerned with what the real Nikki would want because he's getting what he wants. I think the scene that illustrates that turning point really well is the scene in the restaurant where he's found out that she was lying about her father and confronted her about it. And she's like, yeah, I lied, but does that really matter if you get to have me? And we see him almost like stop and think about it. And then he says, nope, doesn't matter to me. And then it cuts with probably the most effective cut in the movie. Straight to them in bed. He's having sex with her, but we see the close-up on Indy Neverett's face where she's just like blankly staring and just totally not into it. We get, in one image, we understand right away that Bear is fully taking advantage of her at this point. He does not care about the real Nikki, and that, as much sympathy as we had for Bear up to this point, we understand that he is the one in the wrong from now on.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's an incredible scene, an incredible cut, and I think really summarizes just in Indy Navarrette's face everything the movie is trying to say about relationships and consent, and yeah, incredible.
We get this sort of happy times montage of them, but Nikki quickly begins exhibiting strange behaviors. She's cutting Bear's hair while he's asleep. She's making an altar to his dead cat. She's doing a lot of things that just freak him out, and she's getting really possessive of him. She won't let him leave for work, or she won't let him go out with his friends. It gets to the point where he's calling the One Wish Willow customer support, and then the person on the other end of the line is
Curry Barker himself. And this scene is actually in the trailer, so you might have seen it already. But essentially, at this point, Nikki has not only kind of gone off the rails emotionally, she's physically harming herself as well. And he's a bit of an outcast within their friend group because they can all see that Nikki is clearly not in a good place, and Bear doesn't seem to be doing anything about that except taking advantage of it and enjoying getting to be in a relationship with her. So now that he is in a place where he is really feeling the effects of this, he's calling the customer support number to see if he can reverse the wish. And this is a really funny moment that brings some levity to it and some great voice acting from Curry.
It's such a funny piece of dialogue and line read from Curry because the customer support guy informs Bear, no, you can't undo your wish. There's some funny exchanges, but Bear asks him, is this real? Is her love for me real? And the customer support guy says, just because you chose this for her doesn't make it less real. And then he offers to let him hear the real Nikki. And I think this is the first official confirmation of what I said early on. This is not Nikki. We hear her and she's just screaming in pain. It's like she's being tortured. And we realize that her body being hijacked in this way is like hell for her. Later on in the movie, Bear is awake and Nikki is asleep, or the creature inhabiting Nikki is asleep, and we hear the real Nikki start talking, and she's basically just begging him to kill her. Like, put me out of this misery.
And even though at this point Bear has tried to cancel the wish and started kind of seeking outside help because he understands that this situation is bad, when he's actually confronted by Nikki with what he's done to her and what he's putting her through, he can't face it and he won't do it, and he just leaves her alone in the bed to suffer.
He gets really defensive about it, and he says, "Is it such a bad thing to be with me?" And she says, "I've never been with you."
Yeah, I think throughout this film, but especially in this moment, Curry Barker just does so much with so little. Like, this is a very quick exchange between the two, but again, so effective and just really the thesis of the film put into 2 or 3 sentences. So before we were able to watch this, we were seeing a lot of reviews comparing this even to the Terrifier franchise, saying that it really goes there in terms of scares and gore. And while I wouldn't say that it's akin to the Terrifier franchise, I will say that gore is very important to me, and Curry Barker really delivers with this one. There is one scene in particular near the end that has been my favorite moment in the theater so far this year, and I think it will be very hard to top.
Bear's in the car with Sarah, this other girl in the friend group, and we start to get the sense that she's the one who he actually has much more chemistry with.
Oh, importantly, this is right after he's just left Nikki alone in the bed begging to be killed.
Right, so he has declined to put Nikki out of her misery. Now he's basically considering dating this other girl. Never mind the fact that Nikki is in hell right now. And the whole time they're shooting this scene, it's framed in such a way that we see the window behind her so many times. Like, we know it's coming, and it still hits when it happens. Nikki runs up, smashes through the window with a brick, and just starts slamming Sarah's head into the steering wheel over and over.
And the way it is done is incredible, because when we say smashes through with a brick, somehow Nikki smashes this window and already has the brick on the steering wheel ready for Sarah's face. And it doesn't go on this long. It's probably 7 seconds maybe, but it feels like she smashes that head for 30 seconds. It just doesn't stop, and it shows every second of it. And we even heard that in the original version, this scene was even longer, and it was cut down to avoid an NC-17 rating. So I can't even imagine what that original version looked like. But this was just, I'm sorry, this was delightful.
Both times we saw this movie, this scene was just hugely effective with the crowd. Like, everyone jumped, cheered, screamed, whatever. Both times we saw it.
And this is one of my favorite Nikki moments in the movie. I mean, not the real Nikki, but after she has killed Sarah, she comes around to the other side of the car where Bear is sitting very visibly in shock. And she kind of takes him into her arms and is like, "It's okay, baby. It's okay. It's all your fault, but it's okay. We're going to get through this." And I think that was just the perfect thing for her to say, because that is so true. It is all his fault, but she's going to be damned if she doesn't help him through this.
Such a funny line, such a funny read.
Every line read of hers is just perfect. I can't overstate that enough.
I think for me, the head smash moment really is the moment that makes the movie. I think without that, we would still like the movie. I think it's still really good, but I think it's just this like sudden extreme act of violence that kind of ties the whole movie together.
After this, of course, Bear is pretty sufficiently freaked out, so he is running all over the place for help at this point. He tries to go back to the store where he originally bought the One Wish Willow from, and he gets no help.
That's another really funny scene, because at first the store owner is like, "What's a One Wish Willow?" He says, "I'm just fucking with you. They're right over there."
I really like that it's established that the shop workers seem to understand that these wishes are real, or that the One Wish Willow is real and will work and can and has ruined many customers' lives, and are happy to just sell them for $6.99.
I like how matter of fact it is. It's like, yeah, wishes are real, so what?
So basically, the shop owner tells him that he can't help Bear, but maybe if someone else makes a wish that undoes his, that might be the solution, because the only other one presented thus far is by Curry Barker playing the customer service agent. He explains when they're on the phone earlier in the film that if Bear dies, then Nikki will be set free.
So he buys another One Wish Willow and he goes straight to Ian's house. And this is another one of the really funny scenes in the movie, because even though we've established wishes are real, it's still a surprise to other characters in the movie. He's trying to convince Ian to break the One Wish Willow and make a new wish counteracting Bear's wish. But Ian doesn't take it seriously. He takes the One Wish Willow, breaks it, and says, "I wish I had $1 billion." And it's just one of the best moments to me is this endless waterfall of cash falling between them that instant. It's like something out of like Bruce Almighty. It's so funny, so effective to me.
I agree. And you can just see the despair in Bear's face because Ian has just wasted what feels like his one opportunity to make things right. So now that Ian has wasted this opportunity, and small correction, Bear actually bought 2 One Wish Willows when he was at the store earlier, so he does have one more chance. He runs back to his house, which doesn't take too long because Bear and Ian are neighbors. And the whole time he's running there, he is warning Ian not to come over. But his plan now is hopefully he can get Nikki to make a wish that will counteract his, because if she does love him more than anything in the world, hopefully she'll be willing to do anything he asks.
So we see Sarah again, and this time she is stripped naked and has no face, which is probably the only other shot in the movie that really gives Terrifier. Mm-hmm. And Nikki has taken Sarah's clothes and drawn tattoos on herself to mimic Sarah's tattoos, as if she can make Bear love her if she looks like Sarah.
I wouldn't even say drawn. I think some of them are carved on. But anyway, at this point, Bear's goal is to get Nikki to make some sort of wish that counteracts his. But at this point, Nikki's not really in the place to have that conversation.
Nikki is walking around with a gun that was set up earlier in the movie. Basically, is she threatening to kill herself with it?
Yes.
She's saying, "Why don't you love me?" Which is, if you've seen the trailers, this is a big moment. Why don't you love me?
I love you.
And then we get this knock at the door, which is Ian saying, "Dude, it's real. It's really $1 billion." Bear is screaming, "No, no, don't come in," and Nikki shoots him.
Bye-bye, Ian.
So Bear basically relents to Nikki. She's, laying in his lap?
She's calmed down a bit. He's able to kind of convince her that he does love her. It's all going to be okay. He is able to, for a second, get away and get into the bathroom.
And the only other option he knows is if he kills himself, he breaks the curse. So he goes into the bathroom with the gun. We see him kind of hesitate to kill himself with the gun. Instead, he takes some of these prescription medications in the medicine cabinet and just kind of sits in the shower. And this is the shot that we saw in September that made us so excited about this movie.
Just Bear totally defeated, accepting what is to come, ready to die, basically. Until we see kind of a almost euphoric look come over his face, and he suddenly rises from the tub and he walks back out to see Nikki, and we see that the other One Wish Willow that Bear had bought is now broken in two, implying that Nikki did make a wish, but it wasn't to counteract the one Bear had made. She probably made the same one Bear had made.
And to be honest, at this point, I was kind of okay with this ending. I was like, you know what? In a weird, fucked up way, this is kind of sweet. Like, what if they both had this curse to love each other? I was kind of okay with that ending for Bear. But what really happens?
Bear has already taken the pills, so a couple of minutes after Nikki makes this wish, he does pass away.
And Nikki is distraught at first. You know, this guy she's obsessed with is gone. And then all of a sudden there's a switch. And it's the real Nikki back in her body. And she's just horrified by this situation. There's blood all over her, dead bodies around her. And, you know, she didn't ask to be in this situation at all. And then the camera kind of spins around. It points at the TV. And it says, directed by Curry Barker. And that's where this movie ends. On kind of this darkly funny note.
Yeah, so Nikki has come back to herself, but presumably she'll have to deal with the aftermath of all of this. All of her closest friends are dead. Bear betrayed her in this absolutely unimaginable way. I don't know how it would work with cops and everything. I don't know if they'll know that wishes are real in this universe.
Because do we hear the cops at the end? We hear cop sirens, don't we? Am I making that up?
I don't know.
I feel like Nikki getting her body back and Bear dying is probably the fairest way this could have gone, other than just not doing it to her in the first place.
I agree, but of course you feel her life is forever altered. Whether or not she'll be the same Nikki ever again, I think, is up for debate. But I think despite it certainly not being a happy ending, it is very effective. And like you said, I think the only thing that really makes sense for the ending of this film.
So who is the bad guy in this movie? Is it the demon who takes over Nikki's body, or is it just Bear?
I think it's very obviously Bear. The demon did not ask to be there.
And I think something that's really effective in Michael Johnston's performance is he makes Bear seem so small and pathetic. And I think we find that sympathetic up to a point. Mm-hmm. When he loses his cat, when he's too nervous to talk to a girl, we can kind of sympathize with that. Like, we've been that guy or we've known that guy. But even before he's done anything evil, Nikki asks him, "Do you like me?" And he says no. Or he says, like, you know, "I like you as a friend." And at that point, you're like, come on.
She gives him every opportunity. I agree. And I think at that point, Indy Navarrete has come out and said that she doesn't think Nikki has feelings for Bear in that way, other than maybe like a little crush that you sometimes get in friend groups. But for me, the scene almost reads that if Bear had just been honest with her in that moment and been confident with what he was saying, he might have gotten the opportunity that he was seeking in the first place, but he just cannot.
I think he had a shot at that point. I think if he had just been honest with her, I feel like she was 50-50. Mm-hmm. I think if he had been honest with her, it could have happened between them. And maybe it wouldn't work out, but then they would have known. Mm-hmm. It would have gone a lot better than what happens when he's too scared to just ask her out.
Yeah, I think he got the worst case scenario.
And I think Bear being so pathetic, it makes the scare scenes really effective because he's like literally crying, saying, "Nikki, you're scaring me." And it works because, like, yeah, she is scaring you. Like, this is really weird. But then at the same time, when he does some of these irredeemable things he does, it makes it easy to hate him and to, like, turn on him.
Yeah, just incredible work all around. I can't sing this movie's praises enough. I just love this.
Is there anything that doesn't work about this movie for you?
I think right off the bat, it's not necessarily clear what the relationships between some of the characters are. For example, I definitely thought that Ian and Sarah were dating until like probably halfway through this movie.
I thought that too.
Upon first watch, at least. But I think that that's not really a big deal in the grand scheme of things. I think that, especially towards the end, that's very much ironed out and is concluded in a great way. So I don't think that that's a criticism big enough for me to even bring this down from 5 stars. But if I had to give one, it would be that.
I agree. The relationships between those 4 characters could have been clearer. Because I did think that Ian and Sarah were dating. And I didn't pick up the first time that there was any type of chemistry between Bear and Sarah. I actually didn't even catch until the second time that the one Bear says his cat died to is Sarah, not Nikki. And maybe that's just because at that point I couldn't tell them apart visually. Mm-hmm. But I only picked that up the second time that Sarah is the one he feels comfortable enough with to share that with. With Nikki, he feels like he still has to put up a front.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to how he views Nikki as well. Sarah is really his friend, someone he can bring these things to. Nikki is clearly someone he has on a pedestal.
And I think there are a few moments of plot or dialogue that could have been a little more ironed out. You know, there's this moment where Ian calls him on the phone and says, "I called Nikki's dad's work and he definitely doesn't have cancer." It's like, what? Like,
why did you do that?
It's just, I understand what that's accomplishing in the plot sense, but it just doesn't really make sense. And there are a few moments like that that could have been a little stronger, but ultimately I do think this is a really strong script and really tightly written. And yeah, like I said in the non-spoiler part, this is my favorite horror movie of the year so far. Near perfect. Absolutely love it. Recommend.
Yes, easily mine as well. I don't know that anything else is going to touch it. And that's saying a lot because I am a huge cat lover. So anything with cats is really hard for me to get past. But I plan on watching this at least 2 more times in the theater, if not as many times as I can be seated for it. I just said this a couple minutes ago, but I can't recommend this enough.
Would you say you're obsessed with Obsession?
I would say that.
So I really do think this movie is going to be a big hit. The way they're promoting it, the way people are getting excited for it, and we know from seeing it, like, this works with a crowd. I could see this movie being big, and it already seems like there's a lot of faith behind Curry Barker. He's already shot his next movie, Anything But Ghosts.
And that has some big names attached to it as well. Cooper Tomlinson is going to be returning for that one, but it also stars
Bryce Dallas Howard and Aaron Paul. And Curry and Cooper will actually be acting in that one, so I'm really excited to see them acting together in that. I don't know what the tone will be at this point, but just the idea of them being in a Hollywood movie with 2 Hollywood actors is kind of inherently interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Another thing he has coming up is a reimagining of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I don't know if there are even any details out about that other than he's working on it. But with everything I've seen from him so far, I trust him completely.
Yeah, I think he basically said there's a lot more story you can tell in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which to me kind of reads like, I don't know yet, but everything he's made has been really interesting to me, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Now, there have been a lot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre projects announced recently. I think J.T. Molnar, the director of Strange Darling, the writer of The Long Walk, recently was announced to have a Texas Chainsaw Massacre project in the works. I feel like we won't get all of these movies. I don't know which one's going to actually end up coming out, but I think any of them are exciting to me.
I agree. I haven't... the Texas Chainsaw movies are somewhat hit or miss for me. Largely, I am a fan. Of course, love the original, but the most recent one that dropped on Netflix, or the one with Alessandria Daddario and Trey Songz, didn't necessarily hit as well for me, but Curry Barker I certainly trust with this material, and I've liked J.T. Molnar's work as well, so I agree. I think both of those projects are very exciting.
I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise has a lot of room for different versions of it to work. Even with the first 2 movies, we have the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then the sequel, both by Tobe Hooper, and the sequel is almost a parody of the first one, and both versions are great. Then we have the version with Matthew McConaughey, 20 years later, which kind of is closer to the first one, but I think still really captures it. So I think we've got, a few really interesting horror filmmakers who could each put an interesting take on this. I feel like I can almost picture J.T. Molnar's version of this more in my mind, just based on Strange Darling. I can't so much picture what a Curry Barker version of it would look like yet, but I'm definitely excited to see what he does next, and, I'll be first in line for it when it comes out.
I did see an interview with him where he said he really wanted to explore the dynamics of the Sawyer family in his reimagining of it, and I think there is so much room for that. They are some of my favorite, probably my favorite horror family, some of my favorite horror movie characters in general throughout the different movies. Matthew McConaughey really is a standout for me in terms of this, but Curry Barker clearly understands relationships between people and has such an interesting way of showing and telling those different dynamics. So I think he really could do something special with that. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and we can't wait for you to be as obsessed with Obsession as we are.
Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts so you can hear our next episode when we drop it. And you can hear more of my movie thoughts on my Substack, Andrew Likes Movies, all one word, including my written review of Obsession.
You can also follow us on Instagram and Letterboxd at Cinephomaniacs. See you next time.
Did you nut? 'Cause usually you nut.